Then there's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, legislative priorities, opinions, and perspectives that help make California exceptional. I'm Brian Green. A commentator recently reminded us that artificial intelligence could save the world, or it could be the end of the world. Maybe both predictions are right to some degree. AI is improving our ability to make accurate medical diagnoses and being used to prevent wildfires and improve our military and intelligence and artistic capabilities. But some fear it's also diminishing our critical thinking abilities and our individual rights and our trust in what is factual and truthful and for real. The kind of generative artificial intelligence that powers ChatGPT and other large language bots is developing so quickly that most individuals, educational institutions, and businesses and government are struggling to keep up. Governor Newsom, in fact, issued an executive order in September requiring California state government to review the potential application of artificial intelligence to its work and the issues it raises for the public. And at the federal level, President Biden is also issuing his own executive order on responsible innovation of the AI industry. On this edition of Then There's California, we'll talk about what is the most exciting technology of the decade, also one of the most politically and existentially controversial, and the ongoing challenge lawmakers at both the state and federal level face to both encourage and foster artificial intelligence innovation and creativity, while also balancing and defending individual autonomy and First Amendment rights. One of those foresightful state lawmakers who's calling our attention to how artificial intelligence will profoundly impact human welfare is Senator Bill Dodd, who represents the 3rd Senate District here in Northern California, including Napa, Solana, Sonoma, and Yolo counties. He is the chair of the Senate Committee on Governmental Organization, and before being elected to the Senate, Bill Dodd served in the State Assembly and was, for 15 years prior to that, a member of the Napa County Board of Supervisors. It's been a privilege to have Senator Dodd join us on this podcast a handful of times in the past, most recently in the spring of 2021 on the topic of water accessibility, affordability, and equity. But that was like a lifetime ago. So we are especially glad to be here in Senator Dodd's district office in beautiful Napa Valley. Glad to have a chance to chat with him again. Senator Dodd, welcome back.
Brian, thank you very much. It's great to be with you again. They're always a lot of fun to do.
It's always fun to do these podcasts with you. And what a beautiful day here in gorgeous Napa Valley, right here in the middle of your district.
It is pretty amazing, and we're getting near the end of the crush. This is a late crush for Napa Valley.
That's
because
right.
of the different
It's
weather.
season.
It's harvest season because of the weather patterns. Most wineries right now would be all the way through their crush and still winding down in probably the next couple of weeks more.
Well, you know, every time I have these conversations with your colleagues and we have them verbally walk through their district and talk about it, every one of them, to a person, loves their district. It is the most beautiful district that they live in and represent, and as it should be, that pride of place that we all have. But your district really is sort of a jewel in the crown, we got to admit.
Well, thanks. You know, I agree. We have the wine country both in Napa. Also, I have Sonoma Valley in my district. Solano County is getting, they're making incredible wines. And of course, out in the Clarksburg area, they've been making wine for a long time. So my district, it's not just wine, there's agriculture of all types.
Of course, right.
And then, you know, it's a lot of fun to have UC Davis and Sonoma State and Cal State Maritime, higher institution of education, as well as 6, if you can believe that, community colleges.
Wow.
It's all there, but, you know, look, I've learned as a legislator for 9 years, you don't start talking about your district and only talk about your hometown. It's everywhere in my district.
Right, and it's a big district. And
you know, when you leave Sacramento, from West Sacramento all the way to my home, and then another 40 miles to the west is the district.
Well, I know the 3rd District and the surrounding areas are only a few years distant from the nightmare of some devastating wildfires. Thankfully, this year, so far, knock on wood, it has been a calmer fire season, but I know the landscape scars and even some of the emotional scars remain 5 or 6 years hence. How is the community healing and moving forward from what was 5 or 6 years ago, but probably to some people feels like yesterday?
Right. And of course, you know, 5-6 years ago were the first ones that were just absolutely off the charts. But even since then, like 2-3 years ago, we've still had fires, particularly in Yolo County and Solano County, in a couple of late season last year in Sonoma and Napa. But the point is many people have decided not to rebuild. It was just too traumatic for them. Those that have rebuilt are already back in their homes and they're settled. But, we still have this concern. I know we're here to talk about AI, but let me tell you, the lack of insurance and the lack of insurance companies that want to rewrite policies when the contract is over is getting greater and greater and greater. And we know the governor has done an executive order and working with the insurance commissioner, but more needs to be done in that area. And then also to make sure that it's a stable insurance market, and a competitive insurance market, so these insurance companies will come back into this market and compete. When the supply is down and the demand is high, prices go up. And so that's what we're in for, I think, for a while, higher prices. But at least we'll have coverage. I really applaud Governor Newsom and Insurance Commissioner Lara for their work right after session ended to do essentially what they were asking us to do.
Well, we mentioned the 2023 legislative session concluded in September, and it was an end-of-session process. I know this wasn't your first end-of-session rodeo, and I've been through a few. It seemed a little bit less tense or less caustic than previous legislative year wrap-ups. Do you and your colleagues feel like you closed the door on a really good session, feeling proud of the work you did this last year?
I do. I think there were some issues that I was really some legislative issues, and you can't win everything, right? That's not the way democracy works. People who represent other districts have their own districts and their positions on a lot of these matters firmly in hand. Fortunately, we had a governor with some oversight and vetoed a lot of those bills I was very disappointed in. So I right now am, except for the one he vetoed of mine, of course. But I'm okay with the way the session ended as long as we had a governor in there with a little adult supervision.
Well, he didn't veto all of your bills to a point. There were several of your bills that have a lot of impact that he signed.
Oh, yeah.
Your bill about CSU being required now to report sexual harassment, the bill that you did with Senator Skinner on outlawing hidden charges on purchases, the junk fees, and that's only a couple. So you had a pretty successful year.
Really did. And I was really, really appreciative of the hard work that my staff put in. Let me tell you, I think we had this year something on the order of 26, 27 bills that were started. About 6 or 7 of those were made into 2-year bills, which we'll be working on next year. But you can't do that without really high-performing staff that really know what they're doing, number one, but then are willing to put in the time and effort to work with me, to work with other stakeholders, to get them not only through the Senate, but then the Assembly, and then get signed by the governor. So I'm real appreciative of that.
And I will confirm that and affirm it. Just a sterling group of people that work for you, and it's stayed that way all the way through. So kudos to all of you for the work that you've been able to do as a team.
Thank you. We've signed, I think the governor signed, we may be almost at 110 bills over 9 years.
Wow, that's good. This was wildfire protection,
privacy.
Yeah, so you've done a lot.
Transportation, yeah, there's a lot of different things.
Well, this fall has brought a very busy and profound news cycle. A lot of headlines across the world, here in California, and in California, and I just wanted to get your perspectives on this. We've had to say goodbye to some names and some personalities that have personified what is great about this state and even this district. And a couple that you have had the privilege of meeting and collaborating with. I wanted to get your top of mind reactions to the news of their passing. One was Senator Dianne Feinstein, and one was the chef Michael Chiarello. And I bring these up not to say, well, they're famous people, but they had an impact on this state and this district, and you as a collaborator, as somebody you know. So Senator Feinstein, as senator leader for a generation, I know that you had the privilege of working with her when you were a county supervisor back in the day, and perhaps collaboration since. Give me your perspective on her work and what her passing means.
I had an opportunity to go down and pay my respects down at City Hall in San Francisco 2 weeks ago, and it brought back a lot of memories. Before there was really a women's caucus, Dianne Feinstein was a warrior. She was a woman that came there and took charge There was so many times on our Napa County flood control project. Every year, the mayor, Jill Tackle, and I traded the chairmanship. And so I was vice chair or chair of that for probably 10 to 12 years. And she would come up periodically because we're taking, we want that Army Corps of Engineers funding. And I was so blown away that she knew more about the project than we did. I mean, the details. Now, it's great staff work. We all know that, being in the business as long as I have. But it's even more than that. She never phoned it in. She never phoned it in. And even at the end, it was just so tragic that she had to go through that. But at the end of the day, I feel like her public service, just what she's meant, not only to the city of San Francisco, the state of California, our country, our world, in her just great work that she's had in the U.S. Senate. The last few years may be unfortunate, but I'm glad she had them because that's what she wanted. And she deserved to have what she wanted.
And she did it on her own terms.
She did it on her own terms. She is probably one of the most amazing, forthright, honest public officials I've ever met in my 25-year career in public service. I admired her so much, and it was fun working with her, and what great memories.
Well, that's a wonderful remembrance. And then a little more locally, Michael Chiarello, who is a famous chef and restaurateur, had restaurants here in Napa Valley and also in San Francisco. And I know you two had a collaboration and a connection that was very local and very personal too.
Really was. He was just an amazing person. He was really into politics, and he was certainly left of center, but with an open mind always. I posted those photos up on Twitter and Facebook after he passed because he was just the guy would give you the shirt off his back. That's the type of guy he was. And when we were at his restaurant in Batega and he was there, he had Otimo and Batega in the Napa Valley and Coqueta, I think it is, in San Francisco. And of course, he was the original chef at Trevina, which is the famous St. Helena restaurant that went way, way back. And so what a great human being. My condolences to his family. But at 61 years old, boy, he had a lot of life left in him.
Yes. Well, thank you for the perspective on both of those leaders here locally and statewide. Let's talk about artificial intelligence, a priority from 2023 and likely into 2024. This is very millennial of you, Senator Dodd, to want to take on this issue. What prompted you, what lit a fire into you to want to address artificial intelligence?
Well, I worked with Senator Bob Hertzberg and Assemblymember Ed Chang back on the privacy bills. Mm-hmm. And we worked on some legislation, and in that case, I was a principal co-author for Ed, and we worked on that, and that really lit a fire under me, just learning and understanding what can go wrong with privacy if you don't have the right things in place. And I think we've seen that with a lot of our social media, and media literacy and everything is not what it really needs to be given the state of where these technologies are going. But, in artificial intelligence, it's not just the future, it's the present. And one of the things that we do know is that artificial intelligence is a game changer. On the run up to this, you mentioned some really amazing things that artificial intelligence is able to give us on wildfires, on healthcare, medicines, all these different things. What we need to do is we need to be careful that we don't stifle innovation. But at the same time, we need to make sure that AI doesn't allow companies, the government, anybody, to do more than what we really allow on our privacy level initiatives that we have and that we passed in the legislature. And then there was subsequent ballot initiative on that. And it's just protecting people's rights. AI is used to help on auto loans or any number of loans. And those things could be discriminating on the basis of age, color, creed. So I think there really needs to be safeguards in place to make sure that consumers, everyday people, are protected. We've got plenty of laws that protect people day in and day out, but AI may not be able to navigate all those laws because AI is not just California-centric, right?
Right.
50 different states, the world, for heaven's sakes. And so there's a lot of things that could escape the notice of AI.
You have previously compared the advent and growth of AI to the invention and impact of the automobile, that both changing society, but each technological and societal evolution creating some possibly unanticipated risks and consequences in its wake, to your point here already. Explain a little further what you mean by that.
Well, the advent of the car furthered a sense of personal independence unlike any before it. But with that new technology came a new phenomenon: fatal car crashes. Government responded by setting safety standards. All but 12 states had adopted speed limits about the time the last Model T rolled off the assembly line in 1927. Mandatory seatbelts and padded dashboards followed that. Like the car and the printing press before it, AI promises to reshape the human experience, vastly improving how we work, play, communicate, and even operate our vehicles.
Well, you recall back in the 60s, it was a consumer advocate, Ralph Nader, that took on government in particular and the industry. Neither one was enforcing or doing anything with seatbelts and safety. Do we need another AI version of Ralph Nader here in 2023? Maybe that's you. I don't know. to regulate and to encourage the change and the reform.
It's so interesting how an individual can evolve. Back then, I was a Republican. I thought Ralph Nader was the biggest nut. What a nut job this guy is. But as I look at these things, I now see the error of my ways. He wasn't a nut. If he was a nut, he was a nut on consumer safety and making sure that consumers got the benefit of everything that they could, not only just for safety, but for any number of things that he pushed forward. So, I would say I would look at Ralph Nader today as somebody that's kind of a hero, somebody that would be willing to buck the system to make sure people were protected.
Well, I appreciate your being so candid about your change of perspective over the years. Perhaps that's somebody that we need, that Pied Piper, so to speak, to be able to spur government and spur the industry to work together while continuing to light the fire of creativity.
Well, that's right. You know what? We talked about privacy. Left unchecked, AI can impact privacy, exposing personal information to those that would do us harm. And we know about these scams. I'm telling you, I was at an event in Solano County 2 weeks ago, and to a person, they're freaked out. Their parents are answering on a text, and they press it, and all of a sudden they're going to the bank and getting ripped off, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, or they're buying things that they don't need. It's just, in AI technology is created and designed by people. And these systems and machines contain built-in biases. And AI technology is like a mirror to humanity. It amplifies our faults while helping us to see ourselves a little more clearly. So it's the good, the bad, and believe it or not, there's some ugly to it as well.
Well, absolutely. You bring up a really good point about the built-in biases, a technology that's been created by an industry that really has, even up to this point, not had a good record on equity, with all due respect, the rich white guys that do all the startups in Silicon Valley. So that continues to be a real problem.
Well, that's the one thing I talked about a little bit earlier. As we aim to minimize those biases, we must make a concerted effort to incorporate the diverse perspectives that we have in our society and check and balance our existing algorithms for unintended bias. And look, these guys are smart. I've talked to some AI guys. They're really concerned. A lot of them now are retired. They're not in the middle of still developing it. But what they've said is, I've heard a couple speakers on this, it is imminently doable. This is a challenge for our generation today. And this is not a challenge we can take and complete in 5 years or 10 years. It's a challenge we must meet in the next year or two, in my view.
One place we have seen the proxy battle over AI really play out, or at least the perception of what its potential and impact could be, is in the strikes between the writers and the actors and the studios. And in particular, the writer's strike, which as we speak has now been settled. They initially went in with AI not really on the table. They were more concerned about more writers in the room and better pay. But then when they discovered that the studios really were focused on AI, generating scripts without human beings, in case of the actors, background people being created out of artificial intelligence, they really brought that to the table. So this is a real life current example of how this can affect us.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And I think that they were smart in making sure that whatever was written out there that they would get credit for, because there's a lot of scripts right now that AI doesn't generate anything from thought, right? These are algorithms that are put in. They're reading everything that's out there, books. So an author wants credit for his books, a script for a movie or play. They want credit for any number of things. So it's kind of crazy. And all of this was kind of brought on to us in the last couple of years with ChatGPT.
Yes.
And I mean, I'd never heard of ChatGPT.
Yes, me neither.
And we did the first resolution
yes.
in the state of California.
I remember you introduced it and you told everybody this is AI generated.
My staff, again, Brian, kudos to him.
Brian Duke.
Brian Duke is just totally into it and asked ChatGPT to write a resolution discussing AI. The legislative attorneys had to do a few whereases and everything, but nothing was changed.
Wow.
Nothing substantive was changed. Then later we did another press release talking about this, and not one word was changed for the press release getting out our resolution that was passed by the legislature.
Well, have you used it? I mean, I'm kind of a Luddite about this. I have not attempted to go to ChatGPT. I'm sort of waiting for that moment when I can play with it, but
I'm kind of the same way.
Yeah,
I've got Brian.
Yeah,
Brian Duke, for heaven's sake.
Well, you hosted a town hall on this issue a while back.
Well, we had a professor. She was really impressive, but she was very critical, very, very critical, very, very concerned about. She was the Ralph Nader of AI. Let's just put it that way, and we were really appreciative to hear it. In our world, we have to hear both sides.
Sure.
We have to hear all sides, and then try to figure it out. And then we had others on the line that really were talking about the salient points that we've already brought up today about how we don't want to decrease innovation, but at the same time, we got to have these guardrails in place to make sure that people are protected, that the biases of the people that are developing the algorithms aren't out of line. That they're following California state law or our U.S. state laws.
Earlier this year, a group of leading technologists, including Elon Musk and the co-founder of Apple, Steve Wozniak, called for an immediate 6-month moratorium on training large AI models. And they said AI labs are locked into an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. So here you have the key techno masterminds of the 20th and 21st century warning us that this godlike AI is wiping out humanity, that it's an all too real possibility. And so this maybe goes back to what I said at the opening. There's the people that think that artificial intelligence could save the world and other people thinking it could be the end of it. What is your perspective on that?
Well, with the release, we talked about ChatGPT last year. In the release of the subsequent large language models, it surprised a lot of people just how powerful these tools really are and will become. We now have teachers that are grappling with how to teach the next generation when machines can produce content that's nearly indistinguishable from human-made content, whether that be the written word, photos, art, or video. And the fast adoption of AI tools like ChatGPT bring other concerns, potential addiction, loss of human creativity, and erosion of critical thinking. And these concerns must be at the forefront as we shape the AI policy. So all these leaders were probably pretty smart. And the idea there is let's identify where the critical points of concern are, and let's start attacking those while allowing some of the other stuff that's outside those bounds that may be more fun, creative to be used. I see a day, and I'm fine with it, where the California DMV or the Unemployment Department, EDD, they don't have the best record for customer service. And we're always trying as legislators to work with them or to help push them or help our constituents get what they need. But I see it as a real area where the state could improve its customer service to the constituents we serve.
Well, speaking of that, I can see that state leaders and federal government leaders seeing the writing on the wall here on this. And last year, President Biden released his blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. And last month, Governor Newsom issued an executive order acknowledging the risks and benefits of AI and directing state agencies on how they can or should use it. And that he wants a report back on this, the governor, sometime in this next year. And the governor has reminded us that with California's position as the world leader in generative AI technology, we should take the lead in ushering it in and using it and regulating it or limiting it. Are these formal statements and these action plans really the right approach? Sounds like from your perspective they are.
I really do think they are. And we kind of got out ahead of it a little bit. You know, in addition to the resolution that we talked about that we did for AI, I introduced SB 313, which would have established an Office of AI in the state of California to guide the design, use, and deployment of automated systems by California state agencies. And the Office of AI would have been responsible for ensuring that state-used AI systems are designed and deployed in a manner consistent with existing law regarding privacy and civil liberties that minimizes bias and promotes equitable outcomes. It also required any state agency using artificial intelligence to communicate directly to human beings that this, in fact, is AI, and I'm not texting you back as a human being, so to speak.
Right.
The bill was unfortunately held in, where all great bills go to die.
And it had no opposition.
Opposition.
And really, of the handful of AI-related bills, including yours, I think only one of them finally passed through to the governor. So what happened?
The Senate Appropriations Committee, however, since Governor Newsom issued an executive order in September acknowledging the risk and the benefits, laying out a vision with deliverables as policymakers, kind of tackles it. But they held mine in May.
Yeah.
And so that was very unfortunate.
Are you going to try again next year? Take it out of stasis and move forward, or what?
Well, we'll see if there's really a need. I think the governor, like he did with his vetoes, I think he saw, looking at President Biden's blueprint for an AI future, I think he's done a good job in that regard. And another bill may not be necessary. We'll take a look at it as time goes on.
There have been some concerns raised in the debate around AI that it is still too early in the advancement of this technology to rush to regulate it, and that government imposition over AI could result in laws that actually hurt more than help, including the creation of, like your bill would say, with the creation of this new agency, federal or state, that perhaps government is actually not best suited to protect the public from the risks, even though government's already using it. Some have said that it would be better to regulate the private sector, I guess regulate Silicon Valley, regulate these technology gurus, regulate the industry itself, forcing the industry to follow the rules rather than trying to regulate the technology. Do you see the distinction I'm making here? And does that make sense?
To an extent, it makes sense. I think, if we look and we do our work in this area, it's really crucial for us policymakers to learn from the mistakes of the past surrounding privacy protections in the internet and social media. We were on that way too late. And that was what a lot of the technology sector was coming to legislators and trying to lobby against privacy bills. We just can't do it. It's not in our wheelhouse yet, and you're going to ruin innovation. We ended up finding a way, but this is something that I think we know and understand. For years, private companies have been vacuuming up our data and learning how our preferences and behaviors are, what they are. And as AI continues to grow and evolve, the data acts like an innovation accelerant. And so you just kind of imagine a world with a hyper-personalized ads tailored just for you as you pass a billboard, an electronic billboard. Or you're watching a completely AI-generated episode of your favorite show that was canceled years ago.
Yeah.
It is, sometimes, you buy something on your handheld or on your computer, and then, you're getting ads for those same things.
Right.
Or you go out and buy one brand of wine on the internet, and then all of a sudden every brand in America is trying to sell you
you're thinking, wow, how did they know I wanted to buy that?
Or shoes, whatever you're buying online. And so there is a line between helpful and invasive. And that is, I think, What we hope to be able to do is to create a brighter line there so we know what that is. I'm not sure we do yet, but that's what the hard work of developing legislation is all about, and making sure that we find that sweet spot.
And I'll take your metaphor one step forward to say there's a dividing line, some are saying, between regulating and also understanding, that we still need to understand this technology a little more, and educating the public and finding ways it can be to our benefit, and making nice with the artificial intelligence czar so he'll be kind to us humans when he takes over the world. So what do you think about all that? Do you think we need some more understanding as we move along?
I do. We know that the AI revolution is here, and California is once again leading the charge. And I look forward to seeing what's coming out of the world's first ever global AI safety summit. It's going to be in early November, and it's going to focus on understanding the risks posed by the frontier technology and how national and international frameworks could be supported. The summit, which will be held in the United Kingdom, will feature tech executives, academics, and political leaders from around the globe, and other bodies that implement these new tools. So we know that AI is still in its infancy, but it is growing. And so I think, like the mistakes that we made with privacy and social media and everything else, we can work on this with those objectives in mind. And what's really good is you see private companies in everything getting involved and seeing it. Unlike the private companies down in Silicon Valley on the privacy issue, there's a lot of them. And it just made it very difficult to work forward those, even though we were able to do it. It was a lot more difficult than it needed to be. Hopefully this time it may be a little bit easier, because these companies and these developers are seeing that there are problems, and they have the keys to the car, so to speak, because they're the ones that are implementing the AI technology, because it's not just all made up by itself.
Right. I suppose we should reassure the world that these fears of godlike AI taking over our lives and our minds and our communications, there's many influencers and educators and technology experts that are saying artificial intelligence tools probably really aren't coming for all of our jobs in the near future. And as one commentator put it, before we get to godlike AI, we have to get through dog-like AI. It's still new, it's sloppy, it's crude, it's still rough around the edges, and that we have to integrate all these insights across all of human knowledge and get rid of our sci-fi fears and HAL, the computer from 2001 Space Odyssey, and not let it block what could be a field with just vast potential to promote a flourishing of our humanity. What do you think about that?
No, you're spot on. There are kids that are in high school today that will learn about this in college, that will go on and get jobs that will be the developers of the next generation. And whether that's sci-fi or I don't think it's coming after our jobs. Frankly, I think it may create more jobs and more opportunities for people to operate, not necessarily less.
Good point. I know moving forward here this next year, you're going to keep the momentum going, make this a priority. This next year, just as a final thought here, is your last year in the legislature. A year goes fast, but what are your plans for this 2024 session?
Well, it's a little early yet. We'll be working the 7 bills that were made into 2-year bills, right away. But we're developing some other ideas. One idea that I have is I think we need, with COVID-19, I'm so appreciative. I had a resolution that I was able to present with Senator Scott Wiener and Assemblymember Ting and Mayor London Breed down in San Francisco for Dr. Fauci.
Yes.
And I am
you got to meet Dr. Fauci.
I did. I mean, it was the same day I was down paying my respects to Senator Feinstein. And I am just in awe of him and the work that he did. He's mid-80s. And that guy worked harder than any human being on this planet, I think, during that time. So roundly criticized by some groups that just didn't understand. He made the point there. This was really interesting to me. And look, I was a little bit snarky with some of the, regulations too. It inconvenienced all of us. But one point he made to me was, if everybody did what City of San Francisco did, if all they did was take the protocols that the health department of the city and county of San Francisco did, instead of 1.1 million people dying in the United States, between 5 and 600,000 people would have died in the United States. So, I mean, look, it was about protecting our seniors and all these people that complain about the state government or the federal government. My God, this was happening all over the world, every country. So let's get over that. But one thing I'm not over with COVID is we did some things really, really well, but we did some things not so well. And I think that we ought to have a top to bottom review of all the things we did in the state of California and what could have been done better, what we shouldn't have done, and going forward, what are the things that we should do to make sure that 100 years from now or 50 years from now or 200 years, that we leave behind a playbook for the next generation to be able to follow. It may not be a perfect scenario, but we know that in the 1920s, we had, the last pandemic, and we really didn't have a lot. We didn't have a lot to go on. So that's kind of an area I'm kind of thinking about right now. How do we do that? How do we do that in a manner that's not a big budget buster? Because we know that this governor doesn't like expensive bills, particularly when we've got deficits. I think that's something that's critically important. And we've got the people still there. Dr. Mark Galey, who I think was a rock star as well, as our point person, our health director for the state of California.
And the sacrifices and the incredible talent and bravery of the health officials at the county, the local level.
Totally. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got their contributions. There's a lot of contributions we can have. So is it a task force? Is it a commission? What I want it to be is streamlined. I don't want it to take 6 years. I'd like this thing to be done in 2 or 3 years and then end it, but have really top-notch people there and leave behind for future generations something that they'll need to perhaps navigate it more cost-effectively or with more health effectiveness. And what we learned that worked, what we didn't.
You bring up such a valuable point, and back to your connection with Dr. Fauci and his praise of San Francisco. The reinforcement of the strength of what San Francisco was doing was based on all the lessons learned, tragically in cases, during the AIDS epidemic and the communities that were affected there, and even Dr. Fauci being in the middle of that. And so lessons learned from that a couple of decades ago saved so many lives during this COVID crisis, what San Francisco was able to do, what Dr. Fauci was able to do. And so I think to your point, too, the lessons learned from COVID can be looked at with this commission moving forward, lessons learned from just the last few years.
Without a doubt. That's really important to me. I'd like to get that done. I'd also like to really work in the area of insurance. This is critical to my district and so many people that don't have insurance. That's absolutely critical. The wildfire situation, I keep telling any city or county that'll listen, and I'm going to harp on it with my own caucus and the state legislature. As long as climate change is here, the amount of money we're spending on prevention of fires in the state of California, it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You start at one end, you paint all the way to the other end. Now you got to go back and maintain it, go back and forth, back and forth. We're not going to be out of that cycle. This is going to be a budget item for a long time. And if we think that we can short circuit climate change and rains and droughts and everything else by messing with these budgets, it's going to prove faulty, and they're going to further exacerbate all the insurance situations, our utility situations, and there's just so much to be done in these areas. Our CAL FIRE has moved on through a bill that we passed, an Office of Technology with wildfire. They're bringing more technologies in for materials that can put out fires, but also cameras, new types of cameras and satellite to look and gauge for atmospheric rivers so we don't flood as much. There's lots to be done in these areas, and I'm very motivated to do that my last year and see what else we can do to improve the future of the state of California.
Amen. And so it sounds like you're going to hit the ground running for this next year. And what a buffet of topics we've talked about. This has been delightful, both serious and a little bit light, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for having us here in beautiful Napa, and hope we can do this again sooner than later.
Brian, I'll tell you, you do such a great job with this. You just make it so easy, and it's informative, and just really appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That means a lot, and you make it a pleasure, and it's always good to talk to you. State Senator Bill Dodd, not artificially generated, the genuine Bill Dodd, State Senator here from Napa. And that brings us to a close of this edition of Then There's California. We are a production of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus, with technical and production assistance from John Roman, Brian Shadden, Ben Abaya, McLeana Woods, Maya Velasquez, and the graphic artistry of Tim Davis. With Senator Bill Dodd here in beautiful, if I haven't said it enough already, Napa Valley in the heart of the 3rd Senate District, I'm Brian Green. Thanks for listening to Then There's California.